Good evening. You're either watching or listening to Redwood Wonk. I'm with David Frank. My name is Eric Kirk. We are discussing national political news of the day. And there is so much going on. It was really hard to decide on what to talk about. But we're going to start with probably the elephant in the room, and that is the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. Came right by his head, apparently, the shot, injured his ear. Young man was on a roof nearby. A lot of controversy about how he was able to get that close and and what happened there. A lot of conspiracy theories, left and right. Left saying it's a false flag, phony operation. Right saying the Secret Service tried to kill him, and other theories. Anyway, it was a pretty crazy moment. All right, the bullet did graze former President Trump, injuring him, and unfortunately, it killed a firefighter and seriously injured a couple of people in the audience. Apparently, the other two have survived, but this was an attempt on Donald Trump, the would-be shooter. Well, the would-be killer. Actually, he was a killer. Was shot to death on the scene, and it's not really known what his motives were. He's actually one of the most confusing people. There's no manifesto posted anywhere. He was a registered Republican, but he donated $15 to Act Blue. He expressed politics to his classmates that were kind of conservative, but generally didn't seem to be politically motivated. So we don't know, and it doesn't appear that anybody else was involved, although, again, there are a lot of conspiracy theories. President Trump was again injured, and then as Secret Service people rushed to his aid and basically covered him to block any further bullets. He gave a fist pump with blood across his face and then left the stage. And this has completely it's historical significance. I mean, it's the first real assassination attempt we've had since Ronald Reagan was shot by David Hinckley. As far as I know, I can't think of any others. There's a lot to say about it, and a lot to say about its significance, but it is definitely a historic moment. The photograph is going to be like the photograph of the year. And I don't even know where to start as to talk about its significance. But Dave, do you have anything to add about the incident itself?
Yeah, the shooter, like you said, was a young man. I think he was 20 years old. Thomas Matthews Crooks, with, like, as you said, no known motivation, and also the idea is that the proximity to where he was to the stage and the security situation around, like, the logistics of the shooting. I think that's what leads to so much of the conspiratorial aspects.
Yeah.
But with respect to the shooting itself, there was conversation about how he was identified approaching one of the metal detectors near the gate, and he was like he was identified as a suspicious character. They kind of lost track of him. But then when the actual citizens that were there saw him up on the roof, there was a ladder, and he went up there, and he was like crawling, and they could see the gun. So they went over to the police. They said that there was about a 30-minute timeline between when they first said, "Hey, he's a suspicious-looking guy," to the point when the police were notified, like, "Hey, he's right there." And
Yeah.
that I've heard various accounts, but around a minute or so, minute and a half, where they were pointing and they were trying to get the police to go up there. In fact, I heard as recently as today that there was one police officer who went up there, up the ladder, but then he had the gun pointed at him, and then so he kind of went back down, and that disruption, when that happened, that's the shooter turned around and shot right away. So he was thrown off his game, so to speak. He was, obviously you're under stress when you're about to get caught, right? There's not a whole lot of silver linings here, other than to say that it could have been worse if it wasn't disrupted by the public, with people yelling. There's video footage of it. You could check it out for yourself.
Yes.
I would say the biggest conspiracy element that's legitimate, I guess, is the aptitude, the decision not to take Trump immediately off the stage. So they did have a solid minute. I mean, I know a minute goes very fast, but a minute and a half. As soon as they knew that there was people yelling, "Hey, there's a guy up there with a gun," you would have
He should have
thought
right
that
off.
they would have, yeah, taken him off the stage. But it was just so unexpected that minute and a half unfortunately led to what we all know was a near miss. So that's all I have to really say about the shooting itself. For the conspiracy side of it, I won't entertain any of the, here. I don't think it's worth mentioning what people are talking about, because we're in a climate where there's huge cultural regional differences in how we're perceiving all of our news events. And, the state of the country is that Biden, our president, is an advanced stage of or at least he's in a stage of mental decline. We'll leave it there. I'm not a doctor.
Mhm.
That people know or believe has been sheltered, covered up by White House insiders, arguably with the backing of mainstream media. That also, with like endless apocalyptic rhetoric about Trump as an opposition candidate, it's hyped up the situation in a big way. Right now, while the party in power is circling the wagons and making several unsuccessful attempts to shore up their support, that's when this happened. So I think that's when you mentioned the historic aspect of it. I think besides the iconic picture of Trump yelling "fight, fight, fight," who knew he had it in him to kind of respond in such a way? I'm not a big fan, to say the least, but you got to call it like you see it. I think he definitely solidified his position among the party writ large, not just his base. I think there was a lot of passion at the base level, but the party now realizes, he's at the center of a movement that is, to a certain extent, unprecedented in our country, and so he's solidified not just within his party, but I think that they have an extreme level of confidence that this event, it's really, it's just, I hate to say it, but it's kind of it's one of those things where he's better off now after surviving in a way that
Yeah.
it's hard to wrap your head around.
I'm just going to say it. If Biden remains in the race, he loses. Period. End of story. There is no way I think he can turn this around. You've got that fist pump photo that's going to be, on everything. You've got a candidate who looks strong and who in the middle of the crisis was thought to communicate with his crowd. And then you've got the other person who can barely speak. And he did an interview and a press conference where, again, he could barely speak. He comes across, sorry, as weak. I mean, there's no way around it. And that's just the way it is. It's kind of a reminder. I don't want to draw too many parallels to it, but there have been situations in which older politicians have lost because they're not seen as strong and capable of it. And the so going around, I think that a lot of Democrats are realizing right now he either steps down or not, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. But that is the impact. It's Republicans think they have it won. Apparently, some senior Democratic person said, "We've lost. We might as well throw in the towel." AOC responded, "Whoever that person is should just resign then and get out of the way so we can fight this out." And but I don't think it's over. If the Democrats come up with another an alternative, and I'll tell you the alternative I think that could win it for the Democrats even now. But I just want to state that, yeah, it's pretty much and people are going to say, well, the polls aren't moving, but I don't expect the polls to move. I expect that the problem isn't that this event is going to change minds. It's not going to lead a Democratic voter, someone who's going to vote for Biden for all the reasons that people are voting for Biden or against Trump, to change their mind. The issue is that the Democratic base is demoralized and the MAGA base is on fire. They are going to turn out in huge numbers now. And right now, there's nothing inspiring the Democrats. If the Democrats can find a way to get their base out, their base is actually a bit bigger than the Republican base. They can win it, but they can't get it out with this guy. And I'm just saying flat out, if my opinion is that if Biden stays in the race, he loses.
Yeah, so you had actually came to that conclusion pretty early on in after the debate. Even you just said, hey, this is historically bad. I thought there was more power within the Democratic Party leadership to fight off the sort of rebellion, but I'll talk about that later too. I think it's important to stay on topic here, so I'm going to mention, in terms of the political, we won't talk about the opposition. We'll talk about Trump and his party, right? So JD Vance actually arguably solidified his position with former President Trump when he messaged in social media immediately after the event. Today is not just some isolated incident. The central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all cost. And he went on to say in the third sentence, that rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination. So him saying that out loud, that obviously it's a conspiracy, it's unfounded, or worse, inflammatory and divisive and problematic in many ways, because, tit for tat, if you really think that the Democrats are that's what they wanted, then you might want to retaliate, right? And then in that context, with seeing former President Trump saying fight, 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 it's an escalation. So in the immediate aftermath of the incident, President Biden did give a statement, and then he gave a second statement, and then he gave a third statement, all of which were attempting to moderate the tone, lower the temperature, kind of some degree of reconciliation. He stopped his political campaign activity. I think that's the presidential thing to do, to step up and be the leader of the entire country. So, I mean, props for that. But it's your single, it's unilateral disarmament. And in fact, this other, I'll kick it back to you in a second, but this other message out there, Rolling Stone published that the actual House Judiciary Committee, the GOP side, their social media account, I'm looking at the exact quote. It's very small. Sorry. It's time to put Trump in a bullseye. Joe Biden. This just happened. So Biden did the reason I mention this is because in his statement, or in his interview rather, I guess, with Lester Holt, I think that's where that happened, where he said, hey, what about this, the tone of what you said? And he atoned and he said, hey, that's a mistake. I didn't intend it that way. I meant let's focus on our target, which is, and then as he was saying, he was like, yeah, there's not a good, in the immediate aftermath of a tragic or nearly tragic, but certainly a historic event. I think Biden did the right thing to talk it down.
He did well in that. That was fine. Yeah. And in his in that interview, he actually held his ground a bit, saying, look, I'm still going to discuss the fact that he is a threat to democracy. When he was trying to say, well, that rhetoric is that, he says, no, it's the reality. I have to continue to talk about it. And so that was actually where he leaned in. And said, I need to talk about that. We can talk about the tone and the rest, but of course it's really rich Republicans talking about, inflammatory. I mean, I don't even want to, don't even want to go there. I can cite a million cases where they actually used a bullseye. Sarah Palin actually used a bullseye symbol on it. I mean, it's just, but is it the rhetoric? We don't know what this guy's motivation was. This kid that did this. Was it political, or was it suicide, or was it just wanting to make some kind of history for himself? Was it due to he didn't put anything on any social media. I mean, it's sort of like we don't know what motivated this, and that's leading to conspiracy theories. They found the perfect person. Not much else to say about this, but yeah, you survive attack. I want to say though, people that are talking about the how Reagan was seemed immortal, and after he was shot, actually a few months later, the Republicans got their butts kicked in the midterm elections. Yes, he won the second election real much, but I don't think people even thought about the shooting by then. It was other reasons, and then lost big again in the '86 midterm. So I don't buy that. I think that that there are enough voters out there to see the issues, but we are out of time to talk about this.
I, Richard Billhouse Nixon, do solemnly swear.
I, Gerald R. Ford, do solemnly swear.
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear.
I, George Herbert Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
I, William Jefferson Clinton, do solemnly swear.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear. So help me God.
So Trump again in the news Monday morning. First thing that happened 2 days after the assassination attempt, Judge Eileen Cannon in Florida dismissed the classified documents case on a couple of bases, but the main one being that Jack Smith was appointed as special counsel, and in her position that the special counsel needed to be approved by the Senate, even though it's been done not that way for years, actually decades. But and the remedy being that you have to dismiss the whole case. Her decision is being criticized not just for breaking the Nixon, the dicta of Nixon U.S. v. Nixon, and a whole slew of precedents, but also that the remedy doesn't make sense. Dismiss the case because of him. You can remove him from the case, and the DOJ can take it over. For her to have dismissed the case, it seems like that one's going to obviously be overturned. And as to whether or not they needed a Senate approval for this, I mean, it's complicated law. We can get into it a little bit. I don't want to get too much into the weeds of it. You could make arguments that way, but again, it runs against a slew of precedent, and she is very likely to be overturned, and she probably will be removed from the case in the 11th Circuit. But I don't know. I don't know if the DOJ will simply refile, maybe in another district at this point, to avoid the possibility of her, and they'll file it with some of their on-staff prosecutors and just invite Smith in as a quote-unquote consultant. I don't know what they're going to do, but Jack Smith did say he's going to appeal it. A lot to talk about this, but Dave, what do you have?
I did see a headline that the appeal was already filed, so I'm not sure if I didn't get a chance to read it today, but I think that's happening. I think, to me, one of the most interesting, well, there's two really interesting aspects. Firstly, that Judge Cannon has been criticized throughout this case as being like kind of out over her skis or in over her head, whatever simile or metaphor you want to use. Very inexperienced judge who is appointed by President Trump and who is not hiding her biases. So,
That's right.
So I think she's been controversial the whole time. So that to me, that's I don't have skin in the game. I don't judge judges, but that's what that's an observation that's hard to ignore. I think the bigger sort of question is, like, how did this play out? So in the Trump versus U.S. case, the decision, I guess there was a Justice Thomas's concurrence where he actually spelled out that he said the lower court should look into the, quote, essential questions concerning the special counsel's appointment before proceeding with Smith's prosecutions. So he's basically saying that, hey, I'm a strict constructionist and I'm going to interpret the law in a way that's inconsistent with case law, going back, like you said, decades to, Watergate cases. And he's saying that the whole idea of the that the Department of Justice can appoint a special prosecutor, that's not in a law. It's that Congress didn't pass a law that authorized that power. But people realize that the Department of Justice is a huge entity and it has policies and it operates the way it operates. Congress didn't pass laws saying exactly how many prosecutors they need to have or exactly their priorities when it comes to terrorism versus drugs versus white collar crime. There's not laws about all sorts of priorities and actions that executive departments take. So you and I have said it before, this court has an agenda. Justice Thomas has an agenda. And, I think historically judges have agendas. It's just that we don't really often, dig in and talk about them. But this one in particular seems overt, so much so that everyone out there is saying it's a widely discredited belief that is in basically in a footnote, which is fine. Right? That's where it lived. It lived in a concurring opinion. But Judge Cannon took that and you referenced it multiple times. I was looking for the exact number, but I think someone said she literally took the breadcrumbs that Justice Thomas spelled out. His was partisan, and his guidance was partisan, and her actions were partisan. So it undermines, I think. It adds fuel to the fire of those who say that this partisan activity just is a poor reflection on the legal conduct these days.
Yeah, I mean, this is not, and she got in trouble in a previous case. She got hammered by the appellate court there and the circuit court, and I think she's going to get hammered again here. Again, I mean, it's it's kind of a shame that she's doing this to her career. Is she doing it because out of corruption, or is this just the way she thinks? Was it everything result oriented? But the dismissal shocked people, whether or not, she could have simply taken him off the case. There have been a lot of allegations that her job wasn't to actually come up with a ruling that could stand, but to just delay it enough so that it won't happen before the election, so that he can get in and pardon himself. But the Supreme Court has to be careful, though. I mean, not Thomas, the Roberts and a couple of the other conservatives have been concerned about the fact that there isn't a whole lot of faith in the Supreme Court. Even conservatives, for whatever reason, are not saying that they're a particularly unbiased body at this point. So they're basically just partisan. So they may actually be a little careful in this, because this precedent could really bite them as well. I mean, this definitely limits the ability of a Department of Justice to do so, particularly if they are limited and stretched out in their resources, or they need a specialist. And again, there are special counsels. They tend to seek Senate confirmation when there is a standing person who is facing charges. They do it if there's a president and the rest. They didn't do it with Menendez. He was convicted on all 16 counts of his corruption case, but they did with Hunter Biden. And the irony is that Hunter Biden's attorneys are now going to be filing for just setting aside his conviction based on this decision down there. I don't think it's going to do him any good because I think that the decision is going to be overturned. But it is a very interesting twist.
So one of the things that I think, just to pivot a little bit to that big picture again, talking about Justice Thomas, President Biden gave a speech recently. I think last night. The days are blurring together for me, unfortunately. But this has been a long week with all these, historic events, one after the other. But he gave a speech at an NAACP conference, and he said I think he actually might have said it outside of the speech, but he was meeting with people around that event anyway. And he said that he has been working on for a while Supreme Court reform. And he talked about two elements. One would be the imposition of an ethics requirement, because right now the Supreme Court doesn't have to follow the federal judge's standard ethics requirements that they all have to follow. They have their own. They kind of rule their own ethics, and so the president talked about that. But he also talked about an element that I heard discussed from several legal scholars in the last few weeks as the court's decisions have been rolling out, which is term limits for the Supreme Court justices. So there's a scheme that's been a plan. I don't mean scheme in like a negative way. I mean a system of rules that people have been working on that would make it so that the justices have a limited amount of time. They basically are limited to, if I remember correctly, it was like 18 years or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's just not forever. And that there would be a role to play once you've served your time taking the traditional cases, so that they could actually, right now the court doesn't take that many cases per year.
No.
So there are probably many thousands of people that want to get in front of the Supreme Court, and then they hear dozens of cases instead. So it's
about 130 to 150 in a given year. 150 would be a very busy year.
So 14 dozen, as opposed to the many that would love to have their day in court. So the idea of having justices like on a backbench that could process more things, there's value there. I think I mentioned the other day I heard other scenarios, but anyway, I didn't realize that the White House is actually working on one. And you would need, I believe, to pass the law, the 60 votes. But I've heard other people saying recently that the filibuster itself is in jeopardy right now because people are so fearful of what might happen in the near future. So there's strategies to revoke the filibuster, strategies to implement to try to establish a constitutional balance where this court seems they're besides being extremely unpopular and extremely radical in their undermining of case law, now they're also arguably disrupting the balance of power, the checks and balances in the Constitution. So people, thoughtful people have been working with the White House to put in judicial reform, and I think that we're going to hear a lot more about that.
There's a rumor that it was a deal that Bernie made in order to win in order to have Bernie continue to support Biden. Who knows? But it is a change of position that they are taking. To get 60 votes, you would have to do it in a nonpartisan way. You'd have to spread it out. If they were to bring in 15, for instance, they would have to spread it out over several presidencies, the appointments of it. They're not going to let one president appoint all 6 people. So it's just, but it's definitely, we definitely need more. And I actually think we need to break up the Ninth Circuit. It's huge. It's got by far the most people, and I think we probably need to break that up into a couple of circuits. We traditionally speaking, not including the special circuits like the DC, there are 9 circuits because there are 9 people in the Supreme Court. So in theory, you would have it would move up to 15 circuits if they're there, and that would make it a lot easier too. So it's anyway. There's there definitely that is in the way of this a factor that's going to be done. But I don't think the Supreme Court, even the current majority, is going to uphold Eileen Cannon in this. I think that would be too far. Some other things maybe, but not certainly not the dismissal of the case on it. So again, it's this is judicial activism, in creating concepts that aren't in the laws, and this is something that right-wing judges seem to have no problem doing, filling in something that's implied by the case. One conservative legal scholar, said that Pence has the implied right to be able to reject the ballots. It's not written in there, and it used to be that conservatives were textualists, right? That you didn't add things. Now, even the liberal living document crowd, they believe that you can expand rights, but not power. They don't fill in and give people more power. Anyway, it's just there's a lot to discuss here. And I guess the big question, going back to Cannon, because we're in August, we're going to get into whether or not the prosecutor in Georgia gets to stay on the case, and there's are they going to dismiss the case if she doesn't? A very interesting question there. And also, Smith is still on the 11th Circuit case, on the January 6th case, has not been removed. So there's going to have to be some reckoning here. And if we have circuit courts conflicting with each other, I don't think we will. But if we do, then it's going to have to go to the Supreme Court.
So was it just Justice Brandeis who put into one of the footnotes that social research is a viable evidence that justices consider in case law? Do you remember this? You're the lawyer in the room.
I don't know if he was the one who said it, but you go back before Brown v. Board, they were able to introduce that stuff. Later on, Justice Brennan, in upholding the procedural due process case, Goldberg v. Kelly, he quoted the Greening of America in it as a source. Now people have done that kind of things before.
The reason I mention this is because people sometimes, we meet real people in the world, and they say, hey, I saw your show and I think you were a little biased when you said that. I think that our coverage of this is not biased. I think that, justices and judges, they can introduce their beliefs. It's that the checks and the balances are supposed to maintain continuity over time. And this is a disruptive belief, and it's not like a mutually supporting. It's not constructive. It's not adding to this. It's stripping away the functioning of a piece of the government. And that philosophy seems to be writ large with, like, the Chevron case, for example. So it is, it seems like an activist court, especially ironic considering that typically conservative leaning justices are supposed to be constructionalists or textualists.
So there is a Republican National Convention happening today in Milwaukee. It is happening this week. the tone has been interesting. The theme is unity. There have been some people not quite adhering to that theme. Ron Johnson got up and started making a real fiery anti-democratic speech. It didn't fit in with the program, and so later he was criticized for it, and he blamed it on a teleprompter mistake, that the wrong speech had been put up there. It doesn't explain why he continued to read it. But at any rate, Marjorie Taylor Greene, after saying some real outrageous stuff over the weekend and having even some Republicans calling for her resignation, managed to keep it, but she's like grimacing, like she's having a hard time keeping it in. But so far, they've stayed really pretty much a moderated tone. And so the big question is what will Trump do? Will Trump show some humility in this? Has this event even possibly changed him? When Reagan was shot, it changed him. After he was president, he actually became a gun control advocate. Certainly Brady. We know about the Brady bill. There are different things to report about the convention, but it really, after the shooting, it's a little bit somber. There have been some kind of funny events. If you want to see Jon Stewart kind of tear into some of it, there have been some really interesting things. But probably the most significant things to have happened is, Trump was nominated right at the beginning. I don't know why they did that. Usually you wait till the end. That's the whole point. And he gives his expenses, but maybe they're just not looking for drama at this point in time. Vance, of course, as you reported earlier in the show, is the VP, not Dave Burgum, as I had predicted. Dave Burgum, of course, was anyway. It's a moot point. He's no longer the candidate, nor Rubio, nor any of the other people. And so we can get back to it, but the significance of this convention, usually they go back to back. For some reason, this convention, the Democrats have like a month before their convention comes up, probably working to their favor this time around. They're probably glad they did that. Immediately after Vance was picked, Kamala Harris called him up to congratulate him and challenged him to a debate. CBS has offered a debate in sometime before the Democratic convention. The Republicans haven't confirmed as to whether they'll show up. Harris is ready, and we aren't going to really be talking about the dynamics of the Democratic race today. We probably do need to, because we chose our topics yesterday. Actually, I proposed them on Monday, but with Adam Schiff now pushing for Biden to set aside, it has now hit the mainstream, because Adam Schiff is definitely mainstream. Pelosi, our own Jared Huffman was spreading a letter, getting signatures for a letter to convince the DNC to put off its virtual nomination, which it was going to do in order to accommodate Ohio when it had its deadline before the convention. But Ohio has now moved its deadline back to behind the convention. So there is no real practical need for this vote. I think was set for Monday. After things started happening, DNC negotiated with this step aside movement and said, you know what, we're going to we'll set it for August 1st, and we'll discuss it in the meantime. It is cascading, though. James Carville and Axelrod and possibly even Pelosi are saying that maybe it's time to step aside. So how is this going to be addressed in the Republican convention? They're basically they've got speakers saying they can't do that. They can't. It's too late to do that. You can't do that 3 months before the election. That's not fair. But that's about as antagonistic as they've got, other than Ron Johnson. There was an interesting speech by the head of the Teamsters, their president showed up, but Sean O'Brien, and his membership is upset with him. At least quite a few of them are for even showing up there. It's not clear as to whether or not they're going to endorse Trump, but there are people who said he shouldn't be there. Period. But the speech he gave all of a sudden made the crowd silent because he was giving a very pro-union speech that was out of place in the Republican convention, certainly with the governors who've signed right-to-work laws. There's a few other highlights, but I'm going to hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you for that setup. I appreciate it. So I've had minimal chance to actually watch any of the live coverage. I just saw clips of certain speeches, and I do think they did say out loud that they wanted to moderate their tone, but in reality, that could be made easier because they're not directly facing the Democratic Party so much. They're more like team building. I know I use that phrase a lot, but this was an opportunity for them to indicate the solidarity behind Trump as a person, Trump as a candidate, Trump as a movement. So you had all like dozens of former, current and former elected officials on the list of people to make peace with the MAGA wing of the party. I guess that's the easiest nickname for Trump's base, which people estimate to be about a third of his rabid followers are about a third of the party. So the moderates and the used to be moderates and the straight heads up opposition. So anybody who ran against him in a primary, like Vivek Ramaswamy and Marco Rubio and everybody in between, they've all kind of come around to say good things about him. I want to pivot to the vice president. I think the vice president is a huge part of this. I think Trump waited till the last minute. And as I said in the earlier segment, the fact that when J.D. Vance made that comment about, pointing to the Republicans and saying, pointing to the Democrats and saying that they were the inspiration for this political violence, I think, it reinforces what I said a long time ago. When they first said it's either going to be Rubio, Burgum or J.D. Vance, I put together just this thought process that he's obviously most famous for Hillbilly Elegy, which was a memoir about growing up in Appalachia, and it focused on rural despair in America. I think that gives J.D. Vance immediate street credibility with the base. On the merits right there. I mean, there's a movie and everybody's seen it. But more importantly, for Trump's perspective, he's been in the Senate for 18 months. He's got some connections there. He was a venture capitalist for, I think, approximately, just a little bit less than 5 years, which gives him access to Silicon Valley billionaire money. And also, he was a public affairs officer in Iraq with the Marine Corps. So his pedigree, so to speak. Oh, I don't think I mentioned it yet, but he's Ivy League educated from Yale. So he's got all the things that but beyond that, he seems to be a witty and intelligent debater and sort of a tack dog, wordsmith, and so if Kamala Harris remains the vice presidential candidate and doesn't get elevated to president, I think that the GOP would love to watch J.D. Vance just dig in, and that, I think that's going to be really interesting confrontation. I'll hand over to you in one sec. I just want to say why a lot of people are telling me that, this can't be right. Why would Trump pick J.D. Vance? J.D. Vance was a never Trumper, and he said awful things. He said
that he was an American Hitler. I mean, the Democrats are playing that all over the place right now.
Yeah. He says Trump does not tell the truth, that Trump does not care about people, that he's a total fraud, that he does not have the answers and is not qualified to be president, that he's noxious and leading the white working class to a very dark place, that he's a moral disaster, that he is cultural heroin, that he is an idiot, and that he's unfit for our nation's highest office. So with all those things in mind, it's really hard to imagine that Trump would forgive him. There's a really long article. I won't get super into it, and I think New York Times ran it, where they were saying they did an investigation about J.D. Vance has actually been courting Trump for a couple of years since he ran for Senate. And Trump was like, you're here. You said all these terrible things. And he said, yeah, I was wrong. I bought into the media hype about all these things about you, but I now realize I was wrong. And he said, well, everybody's coming around here, kissing the ring. You're not kissing the ring. Why not? And he's like, well, I don't do that. I'm not kissing the ring. I want to earn your respect. That was like 2 years ago. And then so there was a concerted effort from many places like Tucker Carlson, like Trump's own children. I heard some other names, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel. So cutting edge technology billionaires come with JD Vance and were lobbying heavily. And even as recently as I think just the last few days before the decision was made, there was a huge lobbying effort for this to happen. So it was JD Vance successfully threaded that needle.
Yeah. Who knows what he really thinks? I mean, he is a politician. Has he really rejected all that stuff about Trump? And changed his mind? We'll never know. But Trump's motivation definitely was the right wingers in Silicon Valley money. I mean, that definitely was a thought. Elon Musk is donating $45 million to dark money groups, and Peter Thiel was. I mean, he's the one who kind of pushed it. So there is that, but he does have that stuff that the Democrats are going to use against him. But they got to be careful how they use it. Again, Kamala Harris challenged him to a debate. He's not committing. People are afraid to debate Kamala Harris. She's never lost a debate. I mean, Pence kind of got a draw out of her, but everybody else, I mean, they were afraid to go to her Senate hearings. She took Barr apart. She took the Sessions apart. He was practically crying, she actually took Biden apart at one point in the debates, the Democratic debates, saying that I know you're not a racist, Joe, but some of your early votes, blah blah blah. According to legend, Biden in that moment decided that she was going to be the VP candidate, even as he was getting his butt kicked there. So she's tough. I don't know if we'll see a Harris-Vance debate. And if Biden does step aside and Harris becomes the candidate, I'm probably about 80% certain that Trump will find an excuse to duck a debate with her. She's tough. I mean, really tough. So we'll see how all of this stuff plays out as we move along. Nikki Haley, by the way, showed up to endorse him. She said a bunch of stuff that's being used right now, but she had a very cold response from the crowd. But she was able to win him over by saying a vote for Biden is a vote for Harris, implying that Biden is going to die and Harris will take over. There isn't much else to report. It's a pretty standard convention. Otherwise, kind of more interest in the speculation, like where's Melania? Why isn't she showing up? Is she even scheduled? She's not even scheduled to speak. Apparently, Don Jr. and Eric are supposed to speak, but there's no space for her. But maybe they'll bring her in at the last minute. Who knows? And then they gave speaking rights to the North Carolina. I'm forgetting his name at the moment. North Carolina candidate for governor, who is the lieutenant governor, who's got a long history of Holocaust denial and horrible anti-Semitic stuff. They're highlighting him. The Democrats are going to make a big deal about that. Because he's got a pretty nice speaking position. I believe Vance is scheduled to speak tonight. It may be happening right now. I'm not sure exactly what the timing is. It's a couple of time zones in. But I'm going to let you close it out if you've got any thoughts about the RNC.
Yeah, actually, it's funny you say that, because that's kind of my last couple. I know we have like a minute or less here. The Trump family has Trump's daughter-in-law is the co-chair of the RNC, and they they have consolidated power in such a way that the actual platform of the party has become something that is now, like in the Venn diagrams of overlapping policies, it's Trump's plan and Trump's agenda. They've decided not to have a formal platform it's a wild development that the party's saying, well, we're Trump's party, we're going to have Trump's agenda, and so
Trump is their platform.
Yeah, exactly. That I should have said it that way, but it's hard to wrap your head around it. But that's the reality of it. So it's a cult of personality, and it's a brave new world.
Eeny, meeny, chili beanie, the spirits are about to speak.
Are they friendly spirits?
Friendly? Just listen.
Well, Dave, this brings us to predictions. What have you got?
Well, you alluded to this earlier that, in the aftermath of President Biden's catastrophic debate performance, he's been making a push to be more visible in public, including several high-profile interviews and his first press conference of the year. But there is definitely a steady drumbeat of defectors who've gone public, including like our community's Representative Jared Huffman, circulating that letter that didn't get distributed. And then ultimately also today, Representative Adam Schiff, who's the next presumptive senator from our state. People who support him publicly have said, in Congress behind closed door session that they've resigned to the fact that Trump's going to win, if status quo, if Biden stays the candidate, which is really damning. The truth is that about only a third of Democrats say they're satisfied with him as the candidate. And here's the worst case scenario. If you look at YouGov polling in battleground states, the senators running for office are +5s and +7s. Biden is like -5s and -7s. This 10 to 15 point spread, it's untenable. And he's even starting to lose ground in purple states like Virginia and New Jersey, New York. So my prediction is that, even if Biden's team has no intention of taking him out of the race, it appears that the writing is on the wall and we're all just kind of waiting for them to see it. So my prediction is we have reached that point where a brokered convention is inevitable.
I agree that he is going to step aside. I don't know how much of a brokered convention there'll be. I think they kind of have to go with Harris. I've talked about that on past show as to why they did it. I'm just going to go, I'm going to make my prediction a wish. I think that they should go for broke and have Gretchen Whitmer be the VP. Thelma and Louise team. It'll energize. It'll set the base on fire. They don't have to out macho Trump because women don't do that and they're not expected to do that. I just think that that would be a potential winning ticket. Brings choice back into the forefront of the discussion and policy. And I think Trump would run from Harris for a debate, win-win either way. That all depends on Joe Biden, though. It's up to him. Well, we'll see what actually happens. Until then, stay informed and stay engaged.